an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 4, Episode 1, A Flock of Lost Birds. In this episode, it doesn't take long, actually, for the crew to start realizing that something is off. Also, Margot is being targeted very specifically because she is still High King of Fillory, and apparently the Fillorians are unaware anything has happened to her. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First off, I want to thank Nicole for commissioning this episode. Thank you very much, Nicole. It's been a minute, it feels like, since the finale of Season 3. I feel like there was a bit of a gap between the second to last and the last episode there, too. And this episode, it was a real, kind of mindfuck a little bit. Because there were a couple of moments where I didn't understand what it was they were trying to show me. And it took a couple of very obvious, here it is, before I was like, oh, duh. So there's a point that what I didn't realize, and they don't do this in the finale, and it's unclear to me whether they don't do it because they hadn't thought of it yet, or because they just thought it would be too confusing, which I think probably it's the latter. I didn't realize that all of the characters who were given new identities also look different now. And when we see them as we know them so that it's easier for us to figure out who is who. But when everybody else is looking at them, they look a very different way. So when there's a moment at which Penny is being ushered into an elevator, or I don't know where he's being brought, but when he is being pulled in, he looks like somebody else. And then he turns around and it's Penny. And I got really confused because up until that point, I hadn't put together, except for the obviously what was going on with Dean Fogg, that when the camera was doing that, it was just showing us. With Dean Fogg, we're seeing it through a lens, and it's very clear that this is okay, this is taking away the glamour, and we can see who this is. But when we're looking at them on camera, and the camera simply seems to move, and they suddenly look like a totally different person, I kept thinking that I had missed something. There was even a part of me that was thinking that this was the Penny from the Underworld library. There was a lot of I rewatched it a couple times. I rewound it and was just what am I not getting? And I didn't get it. And I finally let it go. And it wasn't until I saw the camera circling around the group when What's-Her-Face is doing the spell to try and reveal them. And I saw that dude and I suddenly was like, oh my God, this is what he looks like. Duh. I was not fucking picking up what they were trying to tell me. So that's my bad. I really did like this episode, actually. I found it pretty interesting to see the way that their lives have been changed, and yet how similar the persona that they have now can sometimes be to who they actually are. We start off with a close-up of the newspapers that are being sold, and Irene McAllister is apparently going to run for office. I'm not sure which office, if it's supposed to be president or if it's supposed to be something else. But yeah, we see this woman, a blonde woman, and she is looking through some paperwork, and there is something that says congratulations. And we're looking at it and I'm like, that looks like Breakbill's thing. And I thought, oh, this is kind of neat. Maybe we're getting a new character and getting to see her entrance into this world. And I wasn't going to be too mad about a totally new character being introduced and seeing them experience Breakbills for the first time. That was actually fine with me. I am extremely curious what the people who are playing our characters as they are seen by everyone else, what it is like for them to play these characters. Does it bum them out to know probably that they're going to be sidelined soon because everybody's going to like be figuring out what, you know, and returning to the way they actually look? I am wondering. So she is, she gets her congratulations notice. It goes through this gate. It's the whole thing leading her down the path. And she climbs over it, finds herself at Breakbills. And who is there to greet her but Todd? And I love all of this because Todd just wants to be Elliot so bad, you know? And like, I can't blame him for that. How can you be mad at that? You know, there's a point in all our lives, I think, where we see somebody. It might be a movie star. It might be somebody that we go to school with. It might be a relative. And we're just like, oh, that's it. That's it. That's the style. I need it. And you just copy. And eventually most of us sort of grow out of that and find our own version of the thing. But Todd hasn't really gotten to that part yet. So he's reclining, looking full on Elliot with his fucking like cigarette that he can't even smoke. It's amazing how he's trying to be so cool. Oh my God. I loved it. I really love it. I love that Todd is still a part of things, even though he's not. I wonder if that's ever going to come up, that he's like been around for everything, but never really been part of the group. And does he have any feelings about that? Like, I feel like part of me would feel a little bit left out, but if he has any idea what they're actually going through, I maybe he's relieved. Maybe he's kind of like, no, please leave me out of it. Thank you. No. So he brings this girl in and she obviously knows nothing about what this is about, asks him if he's a hallucination, the usual rigmarole. She gets taken in to do her test and they're watching this girl. And apparently she did something really noticeable at one point that, I guess this is maybe like, this is what caught their interest in inviting her in the first place. But at this point, we still don't know who she really is because I believe that nobody knew that they looked different. So it hadn't really occurred to any of us. But, we have Dean Fogg and the professor, whose name I will never remember, talking in the back. And they're discussing how they have had to like stagger the tests because they don't even have enough of a supply of magic for the students to all take the test at the same time. And she's complaining about it, even though there's really nothing to be done. And at this, then she says something about how this girl is a dud. Looks like the weird one's a dud is the way she puts it. We're watching her get every answer wrong straight in a row, like every single solitary one. And that's particularly unusual. I think that's what gets his attention is just like, it's one thing to get one right, one wrong here and there, but she's just getting them all wrong. And how could she possibly have been invited here if she gets everything wrong? Huggabug is here. He's always just popping up like an annoying little brother. Hey guys, hi, I'm here. I see you're hanging out. Can I hang out? No, go away, Todd. Yeah. Lipson. I don't know why I can't remember that. So yeah, he says, is that the one that you said shorted out the globe? And she says, yeah. And he says, never seen that before. And it was late in the day, no? Supply runs low. Could be that. And she says, true. I'll pull her and wipe her as soon as she's done the written portion. And this is when the dean looks through the glass to try and tell who she is. And it's obvious that he saw, but the glass breaks. And he says, when Lipson tries to take the glass away from him to look through herself, that it gave him a terrible headache and that he would advise against it. I didn't see anything, and I've got a splitting headache now. So she says, I'll take your word for it. And he advises her to keep the girl because for now He's just interested. And then we get the reveal that that's Julia sitting there. And I really love this opening for a couple reasons. First, it's a great way to show us that they're different people. Second, it's a great way to show us that Breakbills is not even aware of, like, the admissions people are not even aware of the new identities that these folks have been given. So they don't know that they are magicians. And I think that the reason she's getting everything wrong is because their magic is supposed to be suppressed, and that way they never find out that they are magicians. But for some reason, her magic was such that it got their attention enough to invite her to the school. And that means that they don't know she's not supposed to be here, which means that whatever the dean did is really fucking effective. I want to know what everybody else thinks happened to them. Have they all been like brain wiped so as to not even remember our group of 7 anymore? I guess it's group of 6 that have been turned into other people, and then Alice is just locked up somewhere. But even so, they would want to know what happened to Alice as well. So do people just not remember who they are? Or do people not think that anything unusual happened since magic came back, that these kids just went on their way and left the school? Like, what story is out there? Or have people been told that they perished in their valiant attempt to bring back magic? You know, like, I would love to know what is being circulated. And then thirdly, the fact that her magic got their attention, but nobody else's has, apparently, either means she's just showing a little bit earlier than the others that she's still a magician, and that the spell that the dean put on them all is not foolproof and can be overcome with strong enough magic. Or maybe when Julia sacrificed her goddesshood in order to remake the keys, it didn't actually take all of her power out of her. Maybe she is stronger than the others because she still has that spark in her left somewhere, and that has given her a bit of a head start. But yeah, we wind up finding out that, like, the explanation that the dean gives her, because she says something about how she graduated Harvard Law on her 19th birthday. She's a prodigy, incredible intelligence. But she, like, isn't able to get past this test. She doesn't know what it is that they're even looking for. Other people have been given their disciplines, and she hasn't. And he tells her that she reminds him of another young woman who he genuinely thought he was doing the right thing by turning her away from the school. But she wound up getting really badly hurt. And he sort of blames himself, and he doesn't want to take that risk again. And so he is going to let her bide her time, and he believes that eventually something will come out. And I wonder if he really does believe that, or if he's just kind of keeping her around because of curiosity. Does he think that she will be able to break out of his magic? And if so, is he hoping that she will be able to do that? Because that's the part that I feel I got from this conversation. The dean doesn't like what's happening, and he doesn't agree with the library's hold on everything. So the vibe I'm getting is he sees her suddenly appearing here as a bit of a maybe loophole to cooperating with the library. He didn't do anything to bring her here. This was all circumstantial, but he's going to let it play out and see if she figures some things out, and maybe, just maybe, this will wind up working out in their favor. I am into it. So go to credits, and then we come back to Alice. It turns out Alice is still bunkmates, or is still in prison, and she is bunkmates with fucking Santa Claus. is pretty great. Apparently Santa, like, he was trying to get into the poison room and he had elves helping him out. He says something about how that freaky sex stuff you hear about is only half true, to which I'm like, I want to know what the fuck you're talking about. And Alice is really struggling. I mean, she's being kept completely isolated except for this one guy's voice. He is not exactly, like, supportive of her, in particular. He starts off with, even your breathing is depressing today. And the librarian comes in to feed her. And there's a pretty interesting moment because Alice doesn't want to eat. She's trying to make a stand here. And the librarian takes the lid off of the food she brought in. And it's bacon, which, as we know, is the thing that Quentin made for her to get her to eat. And she gets really mad and is like, and calls her a nosy bitch and asks, so if you read that, then I guess you read the other stuff too. Did it tell you what positions we used? Did it tell you how many times I came? Like, I really, really like when Alice gets like this. There's a lot of moments with her anger that I don't really understand why she's getting as angry as she is, or the acting of her anger doesn't quite ring for me. But that scene I thought was really well done and felt like that was real rage. It was like if you were talking to her talking to the librarian here felt to me like if you are talking to somebody who like works at Facebook and they bring up something really, really super personal and you are suddenly reminded that like they can find out practically everything about you, you know, and you're just like, oh, right. Yeah, that's terrifying. And also I hate you. And the librarian is saying that she doesn't want Alice to starve to death, that it would be unpleasant for both of them, and that she understands that Alice feels guilty, but that what they did was their own choice. Now, here's the thing. It's like, is what they did their own choice? Does that count? They were coerced. You guys ambushed them. Alice destroyed the keys. Things would not have ended up this way. She's trying to behave as if, well, there's just consequences to what they chose to do. That's not how that works when what the consequences are is due to you meddling and wanting something and going in and taking it. I really like this librarian. I really hate her. I really do. She's just super good at rationalizing all of the garbage shit she has done and tells herself whatever she needs to tell herself. And it's all bullshit. She is a liar. And the fact that she believes her own lies is worse than anything, you know? So anyway, yeah, she has this like kind of conversation with Alice. And then when she leaves, she goes into a meeting with Dean Fogg. And he wants to know how Alice is doing. He is kind of interested in seeing her, but she doesn't seem to think that that's a good idea. And he's bringing her the files on all of the new students. And he kind of like seems a little bit resentful of the fact that she is asking for them. He says, yes, well, you did, what's the word? Mandate that I do so. And she tries to be like, well, this is merely for our records. We have total faith in your selection methods. So she points out the student that is Julia and mentions about Professor Lipson talking about the globe. And she says, do you know why that happened? And he says, I'm sure it will become clear she has great potential. To which the librarian says, in what way? And it's really like unclear to me whether or not she is suspicious or whether or not it's a genuine inquiry because he accepted a student that failed every question. And she's just really kind of like, what's the deal here? I don't know if she is aware that students can come back after this like magic has been performed on them. Does she know that this is even a possibility? I don't know. But yeah, she says, I trust your instinct, approved, always a pleasure, and behaves as if this is the end of the meeting. And this is when he starts to get a little bit pushy about how Alice is doing and everything. And this is when we get to see, because he talks about the thing that she saw in the castle. And we find out that, like, the thing that she saw in the castle, it's not that they don't believe what she saw, because it did feel weird to me that nobody seemed to be listening to her. What it is that, as the librarian puts it, she has independent contractors working on this. And Dean Fogg says, yeah, I have told her, but she's not worried about mass destruction. She's worried about her friends. And she says, I can't think of anyone better protected than they. And we get to see this little montage. Now, guys, I'll tell you, I feel like a huge dodo. It's all my fault. Because this montage, there are several moments. I mean, when we see Josh and he's cleaning the car mirror, he looks like somebody else, straightens up, and he's Josh. I will be honest, I didn't even put together that those were supposed to be the same dude. Straight up didn't get it. Like, I was just like, oh, Josh is here. I did not think this guy was, like, related to the Josh that I was seeing. I had no understanding that they were supposed to be the same person. I felt so damn dense when I began to pick up on what was going on. It was, like, I said something about how figuring it out with Penny was like the camera circling around them. But honestly, then there's the moment with Quentin and he like sees his reflection and he looks like somebody else in the reflection. And even that, I was kind of like, huh, that's weird. Like, I don't know what's the matter with me. So yeah, because this dude is cleaning his car, and then when the camera like continues to turn, it turns out to be Josh. I don't know. And Dean Fogg is kind of mad and is just like, everybody is talking about how Irene McAllister brought back magic, but this is complete bullshit. And we know that my students are the ones who brought it back and deserve the credit. And everybody is like worshiping Irene, and she's a fucking monster. He doesn't say that, but like we know it. And she says that the order stepped in a supervisory role. Girl, you just need to fucking stop. And the thing that's rough about this is that you can't just like kill the head librarian and then the rest of the library falls into chaos. The library is a system that needs to be taken down. And it's not like the library itself isn't a valid exercise. I don't want the library to go away because it seems like a really valuable resource that makes sense. Having some protection on certain areas also makes sense. I don't think there should be things that are completely restricted for no human eyes to ever see necessarily. If so, maybe just destroy that stuff. I don't know. Call me crazy if you think that nobody should ever see it. But I do think that as much as I want to pin all of my hatred for everything that's happening on her, she is not really the primary problem. She is simply the figurehead for the problem. So yeah, she's arguing about making things safer. And the dean says, I'm not trying to argue the cost. And this is when we get the shot of fucking Penny. I like this dude. Penny being this persona is one of my favorite things. I'm just going to mention that now. Everybody else behaves pretty similarly to how they were before. Penny is the one that's got such a distinct vibe. He is so much more positive. so much more joyous about everything, so much friendlier, so much more concerned about the people around him and interested in having a good time and making the best of things, that I am dying to know whether or not any of that will stick around when he comes back to himself. Because is he going to be like, will they remember who they were, first of all? And I don't mean like who they were before they were changed. I mean, when they come back to themselves, will they have a full memory of everything that they did under their other persona? And if so, what will his reaction to that be? But yeah, I just like, he I think is my favorite effect. And yeah, this is what, and the girl that's supposed to be Margot, we see her like walk through the door and she looks so similar to Margot. And I was watching this on my big TV. So this actually was a thing with Crazy Ex-Girlfriend as well. I'm realizing that when I watch things on my computer, it's a little bit better in terms of catching certain details than my television, which is too bad because on the TV, I feel like I'm able to immerse myself more than at my computer because I'm tempted to do other stuff when I'm at my desk. But I will be too far. Like, for example, I watched this again on my computer, and that was when I saw the Irene McAllister headlines. I did not even see them on my television. It was like a little bit too small for me to really like tell what it said in the headline. So yeah, this moment where Margot is like walking up, and she is an actress that I recognized, but then she walks through the door and she's her. And I was like, oh, okay, it's Margot. And I just thought I missaw her. I was like, oh, I guess I just like my eyes aren't great. And she just looked like somebody else for a second. I can't tell you guys how stupid I feel. It's fine. So yeah, and she's like, you know, got the same attitude that she has had and is doing the same type of job that you would think Margot, that the Margot we know and love does. And I assume that that has something to do with like, making a persona, like basing it off of parts of a person's actual personality is probably easier to do. But I do wonder about Penny then. And then we've got this great reveal with Katie, because we end the last episode of the last season with Katie like picking up drugs or dealing drugs or I don't even remember what it was. And so then we go to this shot with her and she's being arrested, and it looks like, you know, she's gone back to her old ways, that she's an addict again, that she's getting in trouble again. But then it turns out that she's a fucking cop. And I was just so happy with this. I just thought that was like just precious. I really enjoyed that reveal. And I'm all like, also there's a part of me that's like weirdly happy for all of them. Like I almost feel like it might be better in many ways for them to go on living these lives where at least it seems like they most of them like feel somewhat fulfilled. It seems like most of them are pretty happy and pretty successful. And I'm like, I don't know if I want them coming back into this shit, you know? If they had a choice in the matter, if they were able to remember everything and could choose to stick with the life that they have now, would they do that? Because I could see it being pretty tempting. So anyway, then we have this whole thing with Katie, and there's this guy that she has been going over with her partner, and apparently this kid has been arrested like 6 times. She thinks that they really should have enough to put him away. And evidently, every time he has been arrested, he has managed to get out of it somehow. And her partner is just kind of like, some people are just fucking lucky. Maybe he's just got really good lawyers. I don't know. But you really are going to have to let this go because there's not much you can do. Like, you know, she has done her part of the job. She didn't get the outcome she wanted, but she doesn't have control over that. And I rather like her partner and the way that he is trying to like just admit, you know, the system doesn't always work. Things are bullshit sometimes. And And she is like not willing to accept this. So she decides that she's going to kind of tail this guy. And we get this like this chase sequence down an alley because this guy like is walking. He seems to get a feeling that he's being watched, and he looks up straight at her and sees her and takes off running. And he's not even really doing anything. He just takes off running, and she just pursues him because I guess she sees his sprinting as like an admission that he was just up to something. And she goes into this shop, and there's a guy with this tattoo that's sort of pretending that he didn't see anything. And the kid ran into the shop, and all of a sudden he disappeared. And the dude has this tattoo, and she notices it and feels like that has to be linked somehow with this kid, and goes back to her office and begins to investigate it. And all of this stuff starts to pop off. And I mean that very literally. She is, I should mention that there is like a mirror, by the way, in the room with like blood splatter all over it. I don't know why that's not something that she like asks about, but she's very wrapped up in figuring out like where this kid went. But that struck me as particularly ominous. Maybe the blood is supposed to be where he like went through a portal. Is that supposed to be like a thing for us as people who know magic to like indicate what he did? I am not sure, but it's weird that she doesn't seem to notice it. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe like that's a bit of magic. And because of the spell that's meant to keep her from like noticing magic or doing magic, that detail is just not quite visible to her. But I feel like she'd make a pretty bad cop if that kind of thing just like fell completely outside of her radar. Anyway, so she goes back to her office and she begins investigating stuff. And she's talking about like hedge witches and stuff. And as she's doing this, there's like this tinnitus sort of sound, tinnitus. I never know how to say that. And her computer is like shorted out. Her cup of coffee gets knocked over at one point. The lights begin to flicker when she goes like into the evidence room. All kinds of things are acting up with her around when she's pursuing this particular line of questioning. And I really enjoyed this reveal of like all of these reactions of her surroundings when the magic begins to sort of get tested and pressed, you know. So she starts looking through some files that have a bunch of graffiti photos in them, because she's putting together that maybe he's part of like a group and is tracking the buildings that he has visited and the artwork on the outside to figure out where he was. So she goes to one of these buildings, and we see this kid who has, by the way, a scorpion for his little avatar. He's texting with a friend, and he's texting that person being like, she's still snooping. And he tries to send some kind of hex her way. And when he does this, it backfires on him really fucking badly. He gets thrown like 10 feet. We see that he's like smoking afterwards. He's got burns on him. And I was just like, well, shit, because apparently when you find out later, I thought he was trying to hurt her. Apparently what he was trying to do is see through her glamour, because he could tell something wasn't quite right. And that was the reaction that he got. So we go back to her looking through his file and everything, trying to figure some shit out. But she figures out what his car is and just goes to his car and confronts him about it. And when she tells him, I know who you are, he thinks, of course, that she knows that he's a magician because she had protective magic on her. Why would she not know that he's a magician if she is likely also a magician? It turns out not so. She does not know what is happening. And he is, at this point, a little bit more afraid of her and respectful than he had been because of the way that spell reacted. And she's in the middle of saying, cut the shit. I know there's more of you, that you call yourself what? Hedge witches? And all of a sudden, a fucking satellite dish comes crashing down from the top of the building and like hits the car and goes flying into the street. And he begins to put it together that there is something going on with her specifically and that he doesn't want to be around her. And it's weird when he realizes that she definitely doesn't even know what he's talking about. When he says charms and enchantments, she says, "What is that, French for crystal meth?" It's honestly a pretty funny scene to me. I thought it was pretty good. And he has this like medallion around his neck. And he says, "You have no idea, do you? You just think you're you." And he begins to pull this medallion from around his neck. And she grabs it off him and says, "What is it?" And he says, "Protection." And she says, "From?" And he says, "You." And he turns around and runs away from her and gets hit by a fucking truck. So, yikes. Unexpected. Then we cut to Margot. And she has fallen asleep at her desk at hip bone. Can we just talk about the fact that she's working at a place called Hip Bone, and that she fell asleep at her desk with her hand holding a contouring palette? Like, I just love the fact that she wakes up and that's like in her hand. This cracks me up. It's so her. It's so good. So she wakes up and we find out shortly she's not actually awake. And she walks through the door of her office and she winds up in Fillory. And there is fucking Ember, or is it Umber? And he is sitting on the throne in Fillory with this weird light on him, covered in kittens. I'm super anxious because I feel like I remember that he ate kittens, but I might be wrong about that. And he is talking to her about how she has to come back to Fillory. He says, "You must go to work immediately, High King." He says, "This glorious emanation can only be triggered by world war, pandemic, arrival of hostile or uninvited gods onto Fillorian soil, revolt of dwarves, or mass rising of the dead. Not sure they'd be able to do much, the dead. They're sort of feeble and rotting. It just struck me as creepy, and I'd rather you put a stop to it." Guys, I loved this. I can find really annoying, but in this scene, he really did it for me. And she tries to tell him that she doesn't know what he's talking about, that she isn't who he thinks she is. And he is not understanding the situation. He thinks that she is just being difficult and doesn't want to do her job, doesn't want to deal with what he's talking about. And she's in the middle of saying that she doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And he gets right in her face and yells, "Fix this now." And she wakes up from the dream very abruptly, feeling the way that you do when you've had a dream that's so real that it's kind of startling. So then we go back to Katie. And Katie is when she realizes that she is not the person, like when he said that you think you are who you are, she goes into onto the computer and she types in Jessamine Lily Cunningham. I feel like I missed this. Hugabug in the chat, if you can tell me, where does she get this name from? Does he tell her to look that up? because I was so distracted by them being like the world falling down around them and her maybe remembering that she's not actually who she thinks she is, that I must have missed whatever this was. But she goes and looks this up, and she finds out that this like identity that she has is actually based on a character. There is a series called A Detective Sam Cunningham Story. And we see on the cover Isaac Karamov, whom I think that is the name that Josh is like operating under, and Kim D'Antoni, whom we know is the name of the girl that is currently Julia. So this is Huggabug says OT is her name, this identity. Sam Cunningham is. But didn't she search like Jessamine or something? Fuck. I got out of the thing. Maybe that's her middle name. Maybe I'm like misunderstanding how that worked. Because I was just like confused by the Jessamine Lily Cunningham. Is that like her real name and she just goes by Sam? Her cop name is Jess. I thought it said Sam on her thing. Oh, maybe. Okay. I'm getting all mixed up, guys. See? Michael says Sam short for Jessamine. Yeah, see, that was my confusion, but apparently she doesn't go by Sam. I thought it said Sam on her ID. I must be mistaken. But she's looking through this, and this is when she starts to realize that like this whole thing is part of a storybook, a comic book. And she's just like, wait, what the fuck? And she decides to look into, apparently, the names of some of the characters that are in the story. And that is how she gets led to some of our other people that we are reunited with a little bit later. We get a scene of Margot and her poor assistant. I love the fact that despite Margot not being High King in Fillory, she's still like High King of something and still ordering her minions around and getting frustrated at the fact that they cannot do things the way she wants them to do it. I just love it. I love it. Also, she's talking about how her eye is weird and that color isn't coming through correctly and is given an eye patch to like cope with it for the time being. This is great. I love it. So then we have the meetup between her and Katie. And I love her being like, why are you wearing a spelling bee medal around her neck? It's so, I love it. Honestly, that spelling bee medal looks dope. And I'm totally fine with it as an accessory. So Katie is trying to explain to her, as soon as I start talking about this, things are going to start flying at our heads. And this helps, but not completely. And begins to explain. And as she does, everything begins to short circuit around them. And she's finally like, we need to get the fuck out of here. We go back to Alice. She has this conversation with Santa. And he talks about how he tried to kill himself. And she thinks that he means with magic. And he is like, no, I just took the metal edges off of my like lunch tray. That was how I did it. And she gets an idea and decides to do that herself in order to get brought out of the room. Now, I am really not sure what this plan is because I don't know, like, it doesn't feel like she had a plan. It felt like she just wanted to get like taken out of isolation in order to get the lay of the land. But then she sees a bug crawling on the floor and she decides to take it and she puts it in her mouth. And I cannot adequately express to you all the sheer revulsion. And I almost kept my eyes closed for like the duration of the rest of her scene because I was so convinced some shit was going to happen, that she was going to do something with that fucking bug and I was going to have to watch it crawl out of her mouth. or that she was like gonna like do magic and turn it into something and spit it at the librarian and like then try to escape. I don't know what I thought she was gonna do, but she doesn't seem to have a plan of her own. When she gets back to her cell, I guess, she just spits it out and looks at it and says that she needs to think. So we don't actually know what it is that she's trying to do. I just hate the fact that she put that fucking thing in her mouth. It's so disgusting. Oh my God. And the librarian comes and sits with her for a minute. And, you know, the Alice doesn't speak for the entire duration because she can't, which I'm sure drives her fucking crazy. But yeah, she says they made their own choice. I know that you blame yourself, and I know something about guilt. And obviously the librarian feels like she should have seen this coming. You betrayed the order, so you probably think I've singled you out for punishment, but I singled you out for rehabilitation. Gross. I will say this about this show, that it's really common for these sorts of stories to fall back on some sort of like religious analogy. Like they'll have this sort of thing and it'll be somebody with like a really fundamentalist like worship of a god or something. I think it's pretty interesting that they have chosen to have her worship knowledge and like the collection of knowledge and this order, and have it be just as damaging. You know, she's still like, she's part of a system. She's doing things that are objectively wrong, but she just doesn't see it because she believes that, you know, it's a means to an end. And it's kind of nice to see a story like this that isn't actually on the like religious allegory, like religious persecution allegory or something like that. I think it's a creative way to deal with it. So her being like, I think that you are, have the makings of a master. You could go further than anyone you know. This is a really like the kind of thing that you could see being a monologue like this being said, about like, well, I believe in your immortal soul and I could help save you. And I know that you have good, yada, yada, yada. But anyway, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We go to the scene where, Penny and Josh and Margot and Katie are all together. They still have not found Brian, I believe is the name of who Q is at the moment. Obviously, Elliot is a monster now. And they don't know about Julia now being in Breakbills. But yeah, this is a pretty great, like, I really enjoy all of them trying to piece this together, trying to talk about it without actually talking about it, because they are all like in danger if they say too much. And I love how smart Katie is and how she has figured out how to handle this and has convinced Margot enough of the fact that she is right, that Margot is literally like standing behind Katie, like seconding everything that Katie says. It's just such a like reversal of how things have been. I just really, really enjoyed it. And also I have to say that the girl playing Katie is a pretty good actress because she's pulling this off for me. So, she says apparently you have to poke the fake ID aspect of the situation pretty directly. So they are trying to piece this together, and they decide that they need to go and find the writer of the comic book. And maybe he knows something that can help us. Apparently this has been written 14 years ago. And And Josh starts to be like, well, I have memories from before that, but they're not really mine because and as he says that, an air conditioning duct just falls out of the ceiling. So they're like, if they didn't believe her, now they get it. And Penny asks, the guy that got hit by a truck, did he die? And guys, can I just tell you how gleeful and creepy Penny is in this scene? Well, if he's alive, then we can ask him some questions. And he's smiling as he says it, like he's either really high, doesn't quite grasp the gravity of the situation, he's a little kid who's just trying to figure out a puzzle. I don't know what it is that he's doing in this scene, but what I do know is that it works so completely. I have met this dude. He's pulling this off just crazy to me. Holy shit. So they're in the middle of saying that they are maybe going to go and see this kid in the hospital. And Marina shows up and says, I really wish you wouldn't. You've done enough to him already. You almost killed a good friend of mine and stole that from him, which he was borrowing. So really, you stole it from me. And she is very interested in what's going on with these guys. She's just trying to figure it out. And we have a whole scene with that later. We go to poor Brian, a.k.a. Quentin. He's doing a good job here, kids. This poor asshole. He's with Elliot. Elliot's wearing a shirt that says, "This is my happy face." He turns around and he's spattered with blood. Elliot is also spattered with blood. Elliot walks up to him and says, "We should clean you up. You still have so much blood on you from that boring waiter. Anyway, we'll have to do it once we get there. We have to hurry now." And poor Quentin is just like, where are we going? And there's this really sweet-faced kid working in the truck behind them who holds out an ice cream scoop of pistachio with Jimmy's. And Elliot said, I said I wanted sprinkles. And Quentin really quickly says, Jimmy's are sprinkles. And he turns around and cuts the kid's throat and then grabs the ice cream. And the kid is laying there dead. And Quentin is just trying to not have a fucking nervous breakdown. So what has happened is that Quentin took on the job of keeping him entertained. He agreed to this. And he thought that meant that he would be kept in the tower. But no. I think he, if you had asked Quentin, he would have assumed the thing got out of the tower. I'm not in the tower. Deal's off. I don't have to do this. Somehow this thing knew that he was the one to find and zeroed in on him because it knew you are the one that's my friend now. And it's following him, forcing him to do things or be there for things. And he says something about how he will be in Greece. It's the only time to catch him, flay that bastard's flesh clean off his bones. And I don't know who he's talking about. There was a part of me that was is he talking about there was a moment that I thought maybe the dean, and then I was like, well, that doesn't make sense for him to be in Greece. He could just go to Breakbills. Unless he's protected at Breakbills. I don't know how well, because the magic is so inconsistent because of its flow problems. Does Breakbills still have the level of protection that it used to have? I don't know who he's after. And he says something about how, because Quentin asks, is there another game we can play where we don't flay anybody? And he says, well, he deserves it. Sad little man that we are calling Brian. I kind of enjoy that. He says, what did he do? And Elliot says he knows, just like how all your friends know too. And Quentin says, friends? What friends? Which I have to be honest is really one of the saddest sentences because he's genuinely puzzled, which means there isn't somebody in particular that came to mind when Elliot said that. But yeah, he says, we can't talk about it. Your glamour gets very angry if I even say your name too much. It's better. You have no idea what I'm talking about. These friends, I'm going to kill them. And we have to assume it's going to happen in front of you. So it will hurt less if you don't know who they are. And there's something so like awful about the fact that he's being considerate of that with Quentin. He's about to kill these people. He doesn't care about killing people in front of Quentin in particular, like the trauma that causes. But he is trying to be like, look, buddy, I want to make this easier on you. I don't want you to know who they are. Let's just skip that part. And I'm just kind of like, oh, this is so strange. And then he holds out his ice cream to Quentin and says, I like you. And Quentin has to take a lick of the ice cream in like one of the most awkward moments. And I really dug that. Because that kind of scene happens with women all the time on television, where there is a woman who is in a tense situation and she is meant to either endure something that is overtly harassment, assault, whatever, or she is put in this weird position where she's meant to do something that can be construed as sexual, even though it's really not, or even though the person who is asking her to do it doesn't even necessarily mean it that way, but it just feels humiliating and degrading. And I have to admit, I really appreciate that being directed at a dude for a change. We just don't tend to write scripts to do that. We are so much more accepting of women being degraded because that's just how it goes. But when it happens to men and they're being humiliated, it always tends to be that they're being humiliated by being made to feel powerless, but they aren't being humiliated in the very specific body autonomy being violated kind of ways that women are. So, thumbs up. I appreciated that. So everybody, oh, right. We see them come out through the mirror. So that must be where What's-His-Face came through. And we see them all standing there. And that was when I was just like, oh, fuck. I can't believe I missed this entire episode. And Marina, this place is so amazing. And thanks. I worked really, really hard to steal it. She puts some protections in place, which startles all of them because they are not used to magic. And then she says that she is going to do this spell. And Katie, understandably, is like, I don't think it's going to let you do that. And Marina's like, I wouldn't worry about it. This place is very, very warded. You just need to hold still. And I'm going to take a look at this and get it done. And she looks at the magic and she's just like, wow. Yeah, big magic. No fucking kidding. Shit. Like, she's really impressed by it. So she circles them and chants in Latin, and they all begin to sort of get like choked up and breathing heavy. And Marina is going hard. I really liked this scene, like her intensity and the reaction of everybody. And she's looking through her fingers to try and see through the glamour. And from what we can see initially, you can't see through it. Like, they just look the same. There's like a little flash, but it's not clear enough. It's just kind of trembling between. Meanwhile, the amulet that she's holding, the spelling bee medal, is glowing like crazy, bright yellow. And all of a sudden, there's like this explosion of energy. They are all choking and collapse on the floor. And Marina also begins choking. And we don't see her go down, but I assume that she is about to. And when Margot passes out, she winds up back in this like dream fillery talking to Ember. I think it's Ember. And he is trying to tell her, you need to fucking deal with this. I can't believe that you are still like not listening to me. I've made this as plain as I can to you. And he says, fix it. And she says, fix what? I don't know what you want me to fix. And he says, whatever's the matter in Fillory. And she says, I'm not in Fillory. I'm in New York. And he's like, oh, wait. Oh, is that the problem? Well, I can deal with that. And he just like smacks his staff into the ground, says many blessings, and she wakes up in the woods. And like, this poor bitch is not equipped to be walking in these woods. She's literally got like stilettos on and this like white pantsuit. It's really amazing. And obviously she still looks like herself to us watching this because we are meant to know who she is. I wonder if the magic continues here and if she still looks like the other woman to Fillorians, or if it's only meant to work on Earth because he didn't think he needed to worry about her getting to Fillory. And her like kind of breakdown when she realizes she's in the middle of strange woods and then looks up at the sky and there's like 2 moons is super well done. I was impressed with this. Like, her panic feels visceral. And her wandering around in these fucking shoes going, hello? And how like terrified she sounds when she says hello. Yeah, girl, she's hitting it out of the park on this. I loved it. And she's walking through the woods and we see this creepy fucking Gollum hand come up on the outside of a tree, like a tree trunk. And then it cuts to black. And that is the end of the episode. So everybody, I just want to apologize for the fact that I don't know why I was so stupid, but apparently I am. And I just like did not understand like what was happening throughout this episode in terms of them looking different. But now I get it. It turns out to not necessarily be like a key fact in the end, but I'm a dodo bird, and that's just something I'm going to have to live with. Otherwise, I really, really like this. I thought this was a really solid premiere, and I am engaged, and I'm very curious also about this poor creature that Quentin is paired up with. Like, and I say poor creature because it seems sad. It doesn't seem to be having a good time. It seems like, I don't know, there's just something sort of pathetic and awful about it, you know? Hurt. It seems like it's hurt. So I'm going to wrap it up, but thank you guys again so much for coming. Thank you again to Nicole for commissioning this episode. I really appreciate you, Nicole. And did I say thanks to Nicole at the beginning of the episode? I hope I did. But yeah, thank you, Nicole. And I am going to be covering the next one on Tuesday, so it'll be coming soon. So stay tuned, everybody, and toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.